Hello, everybody. Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Tuesday's edition, and we have a unique situation today. We are broadcasting from multiple sites in Louisville, Kentucky, my hometown, and I'm happy to have Heather Schaus as my guest today. Heather is of the blog site Schaus in the House. She's a frequent guest on Schaftlein Report. Heather, welcome back to the show. Happy to have you with us today.
Thanks so much, Mark. I'm so excited to be back with you. I've missed being here.
Well, it's always nice having a conversation with you. And, here I am in Louisville, Kentucky. You're broadcasting here. We're from separate locations here in the city. But for our audience, quick update. My brother continues to make good progress. I'm really happy about that. And I'm very happy that I could get some local talent, Heather, to come on my show today. So it's a good day here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky in the great city of Louisville. Heather, let me get right to it. Look, big topic of the day. The FBI and the Justice Department are coming under withering criticism over really two fronts. First of all, they had an escort, a 25-year veteran, Timothy Thibault, I think is how you pronounce his name, of the FBI for his role in the Hunter Biden laptop case, which obviously influenced the 2020 election, for possibly his role involved in this Trump case. I'll put that in parentheses, the Trump case, the Trump raid. Alan Dershowitz, a prominent attorney you're familiar with, all of our audiences, is saying, look, the DOJ has no credibility on this. And add that into Mark Zuckerberg admitting that Facebook deliberately suppressed evidence of the Hunter Biden laptop story in the weeks leading to the 2020 election. Heather, what are your thoughts on all these revelations? They're really stark.
So let's go back to 2016, right? We know that the FBI is corrupt. We know that the DOJ is corrupt. We know that they have been completely politicized, and it was utilized against Republicans in not one, but now two elections. With regards to the Hunter Biden situation, I'm sorry, but some of the things that I've seen that are on that laptop and some of the things that we've seen coming out of Ashley Biden's diary and things like that, we know that Hunter Biden lied on an application for a firearm. Like if any of these things were done by the average everyday citizen, we would never see the light of day again. So in addition to the corruption that we see within the system, you also see a situation where there's a two-tiered system. So it's not just, the government working politically, but you also have the government protecting its own and look at what's happening to people who participated in January 6th. Some of them are still in jail and not seeing the light of day. A speedy trial? Come on now.
Yeah, no, that's not happening. What's really troubling from my perspective about everything related to this story, and I'm going to use the comparison, it's been made in the media a lot, and this is one time where I tend to agree with them. Again, in 2016, Hillary Clinton whitewashes 33,000 emails, pulls out a hammer and destroys her Blackberries or whatever cell phone she was using at the time. The Hunter Biden laptop story, now it's coming out, 2 years almost after the election, that the FBI deliberately suppressed it with the assistance of Facebook. And oh, by the way, Mark Zuckerberg, who contributed possibly up to $500 million towards the election of Joe Biden, the whole thing reeks. And, I've heard people say, well, it's an old story, there's nothing there. Even the disgraced former CNN host Brian Stelter admitted, well, maybe there was something here. Now, when Humpty Dumpty comes out and says there may be something there, you got to believe that there is something there. I mean, this thing is really bad. It reeks. And then, Heather, when you add in the fact that we get the massive redactions here on this Trump situation, and again, a lot of people are coming on television saying they know what's in it. Look, the truth is no one knows other than the FBI and the DOJ what was redacted along with the judge. I mean, this thing just, I think your analysis was right. If this was happening to a Republican, everything would be out in the open. But no, because A, it was Hunter Biden, suppression, Donald Trump, aggressive pursuit. I mean, I've got a big concern relative to our democracy about this.
Here's my bigger concern, Mark. You see a lot of these politicians like Grassley, they're coming out strongly worded letters and we want to do, an investigation and stuff like that. Well, Congress controls the purse strings. Pull the money. The FBI should be completely defunded at this point. Just do away with it. Either start over or find another way to work with state and local government. And remove this Federal Bureau of Investigation. We shouldn't have it anymore. They have become complete, like it's like a cancer. Once it becomes overwhelming, there's no control over it. What oversight do we have at this point? And I'll be honest with you, Mark, and sometimes I give you some pushback on this. Christopher Wray was put into his position by who?
Donald Trump.
He had the opportunity to selectively put somebody who would be fair in that position, and he chose Christopher Wray. So he kind of has no one to blame but himself in this situation. So I think we really need to evaluate, rather than having these strongly worded letters, let's start pulling some funding. Stop paying them to,
yeah, I got to push back on you there, and I'll tell you why. When all the riots were happening in blue cities across the country, and you heard the far left-wing radicals clamoring for defund the police, I thought that was one of the stupidest ideas I ever heard. And it was just what it led to in some cities that actually did it, like Portland and Seattle, crime skyrocketed. The city wasn't safe. It was an absolute debacle. And frankly, it was like an anvil around the necks of some Democrats running for office. I don't advocate any possible thing about defunding the FBI. A, it's never going to happen. B, Democrats are in charge of the purse strings because they control the House of Representatives. So I'm not someone who's going to wishful thinking. I don't even want it to happen. What I do want is some fair reforms. And I think what that's going to take is for Republicans to take control of the House of Representatives in this fall election, and then we can have proper oversight into what really occurred there. We have currently an inspector general. Jim Jordan spoke about this. My question is, where's the IG? Where's the inspector general in dealing with this? Now, I keep hearing things from some well-respected conservatives saying, well, something's going to happen with Hunter Biden. I'm not buying that at all. My belief, something may happen to Donald Trump before something happens to Hunter Biden. I mean, I really believe that. I mean, this guy has gotten away with a lot, and he's lied in his depositions. And look, we all know what happened with Donald Trump. Okay, first they had the Russia collusion hoax. Not one scintilla of evidence, zero, about an entirely made-up case by Hillary Clinton and the Clinton thugs that put that piece together. Then we had an impeachment over a phone call, which was just completely ridiculous. Then we had an impeachment of Trump 2 weeks before he's going to leave office. And now we have the raid on Mar-a-Lago. Okay, did Trump not cooperate? Probably. You hear confirmed stories, even from Trump acolytes. Well, they asked for it, then they asked for it again, and then they strongly asked for it, and then finally they just said, the heck with this, we're going to go in and get it. Now, Trump probably should have cooperated more. I'll grant that. But this whole pattern, Heather, of Democrats get passes, Republicans pay the price, at least Grassley and Johnson are starting the train going here. So, that's sort of my take on where we are. And there's so much more that's going to come out. You and I both know eventually that affidavit is going to be made public.
I want to go back to my point. When I said defund the FBI, I wasn't saying defund the police altogether. When things happen in local cities, if you have your local police departments that are the FBI is not going to respond to that, right? It's your state and local police officers. And I'm not saying defund them, but I am saying look at the FBI and say, hey, you know what? We're not going to give you as big of a budget this year. and then see if we get some moves made, see if we get some, because money is what talks, right? In Washington. That's it. That's all that speaks there.
Yeah, the only thing I would say to that is it goes back to the old, how does Washington treat a budget cut? Well, if the rate, and folks, this really happens. There is no such thing as a budget cut in Washington, D.C. What's often referred to when you hear Democrats, oh my God, they cut the budget. No, they didn't cut the budget. They cut the rate of increase in certain departments. Listen, I'm of the belief this. Look, we have, and we'll talk about this a little bit later in our show, literally crime is out of control in this country as a result of a lot of Democratic policies, free bail, no bail, letting criminals out, these woke prosecutors. I mean, we got problems here. And that's mainly at state and local levels. I think I would love to see the FBI return back to the prestigious, respected law enforcement agency that it was. Now, Mike Pence has come out, and said, hey, these attacks, some of them were over the top and unwarranted. Well, maybe he's right, maybe he's not. But when we see it, Heather, with our own eyes, what actually happened, in a presidential election that was decided, Conrad Black had a piece out today. That election was decided by 50,000 votes in Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, those 3 states. And again, did the Hunter Biden story influence it? I assume it did. I mean,
Sure.
I can't point to any unequivocal proof, but you got to believe that had that story gotten out, some people that were thinking about voting for Joe Biden because of the quote stability he would bring, I don't think that necessarily would have been the case. Anyhow, we're never going to know the answer. It's
Right.
counterfactual, but a lot of people believe, it had influence. Why was Mark Zuckerberg suppressing it on Facebook if there was no influence? Tell me that one.
Right. Because he was told to. I mean, let's be real. And so the question then becomes, well, who told you and who told them to tell you? Let's really get into something. Okay, Mark Zuckerberg's just one human, and that's a huge machine, right? So there were other strings being pulled that maybe he wasn't even aware of at that point. So I'm hesitant to just point all of the fingers at him individually, but let's work this back and find out. There's phone calls, there's emails, there's a trace of where that direction came from. So anyway, I know we got other stuff we got.
We got other stuff to talk about, but you and I both know the only way this is ever going to come to the forefront, assuming the FBI doesn't indict Hunter Biden for, at worst, lying to prosecutors, then it's going to take congressional investigators. And the only way that happens if Republicans take the House. And right now they're looking pretty good on that. But you're right. Let's move on, to a couple other things.
That's my fault. I'm sorry.
Look, news breaking recently. Biden is going to have tonight. I literally cannot believe when I saw this story, folks. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Here we're going to have a president go on national TV tonight, and a handful of people will probably watch it. It's late August. Kids are starting back school. People are coming back from vacation. People are already ticked off at Biden. He's upside down in 47 out of 50 states. And here he's going to deliver a primetime speech about the dangers to the constitutional republic that we call the United States from none other than MAGA Republicans. I'll guarantee you tonight he's going to have a line. Well, look, we don't have anything against conservatives or moderates in the Republican Party, but these badass MAGA people, they want to suppress the Constitution. I can hear it now. It's going to be straight out of the Saul Alinsky propaganda playbook. And I'm just wondering what radicals in the White House have encouraged Biden to make such a statement. I've been around politics a long time. I can never remember any president of either party coming on national television to slam the other political party 75 days outside of a midterm election. Your thoughts, Heather?
I said it the other day. I'm not a domestic extremist. You're a tyrannical government, right? That's where we're at this point. So it's really interesting. it's like monkeys say, but not monkey do kind of situation. Like they want to call everyone else extremists. They want to call everyone else domestic terrorists or whatever, but their actions are what they're projecting onto other people. And that's what this feels like, is complete and total projection. You are not allowed to dissent. You are not allowed to disagree with me. You are not allowed to have an issue with my policies. If you do, we are going to label you a domestic extremist and make your life miserable. Dear citizen, go vote for me or else, and it's like, we're becoming a country that's incapable of having any sort of civil discourse anymore, because we have leaders who are telling us we're bad people for not agreeing with them. And that's I mean, Saul Alinsky aside, like that's the beginning of a communist fascist government, period.
Well, considering that the far left-wing radicals in the Democratic Party are the ones controlling Joe Biden, it doesn't surprise me. I will wait. We'll analyze the speech tonight so that, again, we always say this to our viewers about the Sunday shows. We do the dirty work. We watch this stuff so you don't have to. You've got better things to do than waste your time watching the President of the United States lambaste a political opponent. I mean that's deepest, darkest. It's really bad. So, we'll keep an eye on it. But just the sheer audacity in the middle of an election season, 75 days out, less than that in some early voting states, for him to go on and do this, Heather, I think it's going to backfire. Republicans are going to be really ticked off about this. Democrats, they'll applaud, the MSNBCs and the CNNs and the pom-pom girls, as Levin called them. They'll be all applauding. I think independents are going to resent it, because I don't think independents like, they have an adversity to both parties, but they don't want to see the leader, which, like it or not, he's the president, take positions like this. So my gut feeling, I think it's going to backfire. All right, moving on. Heather, you've had some pretty strong opinions about what's happening at our southern border. We've talked about that a lot. I mean, when I see all the, quote, unvaccinated illegal immigrants coming across, I see no enforcement action whatsoever. Heather, what's to make of this? What's going on? There are no consequences for these people coming across. 2 million so far, and it's not getting any better.
Mark, it's so sad. I was watching a video before I got on here with you, and it was a reporter who was reporting on some border crossings. And this man and this woman had a baby that had been drugged so that it wouldn't cry and resist them, so that they could pretend that that was their child to be granted amnesty. Both, and I know that this is you have a conservative show, and the majority of your listeners and watchers are conservative leaning individuals. But this is a two-party problem. Congress has the authority and the power to fix this issue, and they have chosen time and time again to not do it because it's a political talking point. Republicans get to say, look at what you're doing. Look at how wide open our border is. How awful of you to do this. And then the Democrats say, you're not a heartfelt individual. Look at all these poor people who are. It is a talking point for both parties to campaign on, and neither one of them do anything to fix it. These people do have an unfortunate situation, and I do think that there should be a clear path for individuals who want to come here legally to do so, including the ones that are already here busting their ass at one job or another. The problem that I have is the policy right now, vaccinated, unvaccinated. I really couldn't care less about that at this point, because I never got vaccinated. I don't think that it should be forced on anybody. But I have a huge problem that we're just kind of like, let's not look down there right now. Let's just pretend that that's not happening. And then there are all these people that are in horrible situations because of it. And I am very passionate about this. You were correct about that. But I don't have just a single person to lay blame on. It is a whole country problem, and we are doing nothing to fix it.
The only thing I'm going to push back on is when Trump was president, he was building a wall. We did have a remain in Mexico policy. Efforts were underway, and illegal immigration was much, much lower than under President Biden. The floodgates have opened under Biden. Let's call it what it is.
Yes.
And again, if you remember early on in the administration, the esteemed Vice President Kamala Harris was put in charge of this, and typically nothing happened. So, I mean, you know, we have and with Mayorkas running the show down there, look, Border Patrol agents are overwhelmed. This is just ridiculous.
Yes.
And Heather, it's not only the people that are coming across, the smuggling that goes on, the cartels are making hundreds of millions of dollars, the drugs that come across, there's enough fentanyl coming across that border to kill every American in this country 5 times over. It's that bad. Yeah. So, I mean, whatever your position on it, folks, I mean, again, Myra Flores, a Republican, won in what 2 years ago was considered a deep blue district. I'm telling you, Hispanic Americans are ticked off about this. They don't like it. They're being used, and they're generally conservative. I am like in your camp. I'm totally for legal immigration. I'm steadfastly opposed to illegal immigration, and it should be stopped. But right now, there's no consequences. Yeah. So moving on. Heather, have you figured out, this is like day 7 since Biden announced his student loan forgiveness program, day 6. Has anyone figured out how this is going to be paid for? I mean, I know eventually the courts are going to strike it down, because Nancy Pelosi, the one thing I've agreed on with her is he does not have the authority to do this. Okay. Have you heard how this is going to get paid for? I know you got your ear to it, but I mean, I haven't heard anything. I just wondered if you have.
Mark, I'm still waiting to find out how we're paying all this money to Ukraine. I mean, like, I'm still trying to figure out where all this money that we just keep floating. It's like these numbers mean nothing anymore. Like, okay, you're forgiving, what was it, 10,000 for one kind and 20,000 in Pell grants or whatever. I think that was what the number was. Okay. What does that mean? Like, when you forgive it, like, where does it go? Like, are you going to put that in tax increase? Yeah. Like,
that's the problem.
Nothing is free.
So, no, the problem, Heather, is he cannot just wipe it out and forget. Somebody's got to pay for that debt.
Right.
Because again, there will be legal challenges here. My guess is it will go to maybe a district court judge who will overrule it, put a stop to it. The Biden administration will appeal it. It'll go to an appellate court. The appellate court will likely, depending upon what court hears it, if it's a liberal court, they may reverse it. Then it'll eventually end up at the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will overrule it, because only Congress has the power of the purse strings, not the president.
Right.
Now, the first $32 billion that the president canceled due to frauds, colleges going out of business, students defraud, I didn't have an issue with that. But this is a whole different story. You know, Heather, the people who voluntarily did not go to college and they learned their own trade, people who went to college and borrowed money and paid it back, and people who went to college and never borrowed money. I mean, they are ticked off. I really believe that this is another thing that's going to backfire, because Americans have a sense of fairness, and forgiving debt for mainly rich kids, that's not a good way. It's not good policy, and it doesn't meet the fairness test. And I'm just wondering, I mean, they've been asked every day at the White House, you know, they do the press podium every day. How's this going to be paid for? No answer. Even the esteemed vice president, she had no answer. She didn't know how it's going to be paid for. So, I mean, we got a president who's sort of out to lunch that said, hey, we're going to forgive this, but no one says how it's going to be paid for.
Right.
Now, on your Ukraine stuff, at least that money was allocated by Congress. So the Biden, he has that authority to spend that money. But, you know, this has not been allocated by anybody.
Some of it. I mean, the DOD has allocated billions of dollars in addition to what Congress did. And it's just like, literally, I looked at a dollar the other day. I held a $1 bill in my hand, and I just looked at it and I was like, this $1 bill literally only has the value that we perceive it to have anymore. It literally it's just a piece of paper. And they have made it to where that $1 means nothing anymore to anyone in any way. Like, it's just, they just keep printing it, and it's just getting to the point where it has no value anymore.
Well, the only difference I'm going to tell you on that one is, starting in the month of September, the Federal Reserve, which when the pandemic started, they had a $3 trillion balance sheet. It's now ballooned to 9. Folks, that's how that spending happened. We printed $6 trillion. 4 of it was done under President Trump in the middle of a pandemic. There was not a lot of criticism from anyone on the left or the right. When Biden passed that $1.9 trillion bill, the first quarter of his administration, that was a hugely inflationary event. Look, under Trump, we voluntarily halted the economy. Something had to be done. But this thing Biden did exasperated, made it worse. So that budget, which is now the Federal Reserve balance sheet, 9 trillion, they are going to start running off $95 billion a month starting in September. Interest rates have spiked to their highest level since the pandemic, and they're going to go higher. So financial conditions are going to tighten in this country. The dollar related to the euro, they're parity right now. It used to be the euro was $1.50 to $1, meaning it took a lot more dollars to buy euro. Not anymore for a lot of reasons, and that's complicated stuff I'm not going to get into now in this show. But despite all those dollars that were printed, they're coming back into the house. Now, there are going to be some issues that happen as a result of that. That's an entirely other show.
It's a whole other show.
Well, you're right, Heather. What had happened was that's why inflation is soaring where it is. There's too many dollars chasing too few goods. It's always a monetary event. You can hear people come on the business shows and, some of these idiots that come on CNN and MSNBC and have no idea what they're talking about and say, oh, it's supply chain. It's just, no, it's always a monetary event. Too many dollars chasing too few goods and services. I'll leave it at that. Now,
I just keep getting you way off track.
No, that's okay. I love it. That's why I'm here. Folks, for full disclosure, I did offer Heather a chance to host today, and she said, next time. I got too much going on today. She had a little domestic thing she had to take care of too. But anyhow, let me move on to something here. Heather, Democrats, they're on the campaign trail. Why don't they want to campaign? None of them want Joe Biden to campaign with them? What's going on there?
Mark, do you remember Joe Biden's campaigning in 2020?
No,
he would go to an event and 10 people would show up, right? Nobody wanted to see Joe. When he was campaigning 2 years ago, nobody wants him. He's like a leper, right? It's just going to bring him down.
Yeah, I think it's more than that. I mean, in Pennsylvania, he's 17 points underwater. In Wisconsin, he's 15 points underwater. He's underwater literally in 47 out of our 50 states. The only one he's not are Hawaii, Vermont. He's even underwater in California and New York. So look, yeah, he literally, a couple points. But what I'm really finding interesting here, polls are tightening. A couple of weeks ago, you heard all the media figures. Oh, listen, we're going to win Pennsylvania. That's done. Oz is a terrible candidate. Well, guess what? The polling in Pennsylvania now shows Oz only down 2 to 4 points. 2 weeks ago, he was down 8 to 10.
Right.
And then in Georgia, we heard how Herschel Walker's such a bad candidate. Well, he was down 4 points to Raphael Warnock. Well, now polling out today shows he's up 2. Ron Johnson's in a very tight battle with Mandela Barnes in Wisconsin, down by 2 points. We mentioned about Fetterman and Oz, that race is tightened up. In Ohio, J.D. Vance is up by 5. Michael Bennet in Colorado, he was up by 8. Now he's only got 5. Folks, these races are tightening, and they will tighten as we get towards Election Day. And the media is going to do everything they can to carry the water of the Democratic Party. Heather, you know it and I know it. How do you see things as we're heading into the fall coming? I know we got 70, 75 days, but put your crystal ball on and give me your best guess.
It's hard for me right now because you have the propaganda side of things, right? You have Mitch McConnell coming out saying, well, I don't think we're going to be able to get the Senate. Well, why does he do that? He does it to drive Republicans to the polls to be like, oh, no, we got to get the Senate too, right? So when you hear some of this stuff, it's hard to see. And polling anymore is really hard for me to trust. I'll be honest with you. We've seen now 2 elections where the polling was so far off. I don't know that they're able to really grasp where people's feelings are. And me personally, Mark, it's in my pocketbook, right? They want me to care about abortion. They want me to care about the border. They want me to care about all of that. What I care about is inflation. I care about how much it's costing me to put food on the table and gas in my car. That's it. Those are the only two things that matter to me right now. And I think they're underestimating how bad Americans are hurting right now. I've been doing an inflation experiment since October of 2021. And I just went to the store. So 3 staple items: a loaf of bread, a gallon of milk, and a pound of hamburger. That's it. I just buy those same 3 items at the same location so that the control is what it is. Last October, that was $10.70 for those 3 items. I went back to the same store a week ago. It was $13.20 for those same 3 items.
30% higher.
Right. And so we're talking, if you extrapolate that across the board on everything that we're having to purchase, and some things are obviously higher than others, but that's just food, so it's just, it's hard for me to look at anything right now and say, oh, I'm really excited about, this candidate or that candidate. I just want to know who's going to come in and do what for Americans, what we need to do at this point.
And let me echo your point, Heather. The majority of Americans, roughly, when Americans go to the polls, election after election after election, 60 to 70% vote their pocketbook. I know the Democrats want to distract everybody. We talked about this yesterday. Oh, abortion, everybody cares about it. Well, abortion has risen in the public consciousness. Prior to the Roe v. Wade decision, on a list of 20 issues, it floated between 12 and 15. Now it's between number 4 and 6. I think it zeroes out. A lot of people on the right are really happy. People on the left are really ticked off. Most people in the middle, they slight edge to Democrats, maybe. But at the end of the day, if you're paying way more for food, if you're paying way more for rent, interest rates are ticking up. A lot of people, particularly first-time home buyers, can't buy a house because the rate's grown up. It's going to be too expensive. And all that money, a lot of people thought they made in the stock market. Well, that bubble's been pricked. So I think really it will come down to people's pocketbooks. 2 polling outfits I trust are Trafalgar and Rasmussen. They've been spot on the 2016 election and the 2020 election. They were within a point on both of them. That's pretty good. And so when I quote you polls that I've quoted here today, I'm quoting from Trafalgar Group and Rasmussen. That's why I think that polling data is pretty good. Okay. Now, is it perfect? No, but it's pretty good. And I sense it tightening. And remember, when Dick Morris used to be a Democrat, and this goes all the way back to the Bill Clinton era, and Morris told him, focus on the economy. And James Carville, another Clinton advisor, uttered those famous words, it's the economy, stupid. The Democrats don't seem to be picking up this at all. These bills that they've passed, this Inflation Enhancement Act, as I call it, that's not anything, nothing. Even the Wharton School of Business said this will have negligible, zero effect on inflation. They passed a bill that's going to benefit America's chip companies.
Clapping for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, you know how long it takes to build a chip foundry? I mean, these are not things that are going to help the American people over the next couple months. Now, the only thing that positively has happened is that gas prices have fallen for the last 73 days. That can change on a dime. But what's happened is it hasn't translated into input costs. Costs for goods are still high. Services are high. Wages, we're going to get an unemployment report Friday. There's some preliminary estimates that say the unemployment rate could tick down from 3.5 down to 3.3 or 3.4. Folks, that's a tight labor market. Why is it so tight? Because some people just say, I don't want to work anymore. And wages, here's the big thing, Heather, economists are worried about. Wage spiral. Boy, if that happens, you have a disaster on your hands. Forget gasoline. Wage spirals will tear an economy apart. So yes, I think 2 things. People will vote their pocketbook, not these social issues, although some people vote them. And I think that as we get closer to when people actually cast their ballot, if this inflation monster isn't showing signs of progress, people will punish the Democrats for it because they're the ones responsible for it. That's just, sort of my 2 cents on where things are right now.
I agree. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, I want to close it out on another thing here. We've talked about all these issues: inflation, gas prices, what's going on at our border. One thing we haven't touched on, we touched on a lot of shows. This affects everyday Americans. The crime in this country is like out of control. You've seen it in these blue cities, New York. We've talked about what happens in Chicago every weekend. Just yesterday in Oakland, California, 5 people shot in 3 days. I mean, it's like if something goes wrong, their first instinct is pull out a gun and shoot someone. I mean, the morals seem to be, Heather, on a decline, because maybe it's the bad policies of the Democrats in charge. Maybe it's no bail. Maybe it's bad prosecutors or woke prosecutors. Maybe it's the fact that a lot of these criminals, they came not from a 2-person family. I don't know. You've talked about this. How big effect is the crime issue going to be on these midterms coming up?
I don't know about the midterms, because you have to look at the areas where the crime is so prevalent, Chicago and Oakland, Philadelphia, those type of areas. Those are blue run cities, right? But those cities also have some of the strictest personal firearm ownership laws that are on the books. And I preach this every single time I come on your show, pretty much. Independent security, right? Like the amount of time it's going to take me to call a police officer to come take care of me is significantly higher than me taking care of myself. And we've got a lot of gun control. I think that's going to be one of the pieces that's going to come out of this Joe Biden speech this evening, actually. We've got a lot of push to disarm Americans and create reliance on the state. The problem is the state can't get there fast enough. They don't have the funds, they don't have the resources, they don't have the people. And so, shy of telling people to start breaking laws and defend yourself, get trained, get armed, I don't know what the solution is, because, the moral decline in society is immense. You have people who literally have zero remorse for anything anymore and have no desire to change that. And there's no ramifications for it. Like you said, if I get arrested, I'm out of jail within the hour. So, I think it's a culmination of things, but I think one of the very first things to prevent that from happening as much is to have more people trained to defend themselves.
Yeah, that would certainly help. And I want to close it out. Well, I concur with you on that. I get a big concern about it. And the only thing, I can tell you this one thing from a positive basis. When my brother had his heart attack, they were there quickly and they got into the hospital quickly, and that's why he's alive. So kudos to the Louisville Police Department and the Louisville Emergency Medical staff for that. That was great. Oh, I do want to close it out on one thing, Heather. You'd mentioned something about Ukraine earlier. Ukraine has launched a major offensive to try to take back the city of Kherson. Now, why is that important? Because it gets you to the sea. If Ukraine's a landlocked country, there's all kind of problems with that. Heather, the United States and NATO have been supplying Ukraine with weapons. I know you may have a slightly different opinion on this. I have supported it because I believe the Russians are trying to play a long game here. They think public support for Ukraine will diminish. I'm not in that camp. I think public support is going to be strong because people see the horrific war crimes the Russians have committed. Close it out for us, about a minute left. What say you relative to Ukraine?
Oh man, Mark, I disagree so much on this subject.
Okay, you got a right to do that.
No, I know. I think that at some point, right, you have to take the training wheels off, right? We have given an abundance of financial resources, weaponry. We have given all of that to Ukraine. At some point in time, Ukraine's going to have to either defend itself or fall. And it's not our responsibility to constantly be babysitting countries all over the world. I understand there's a strategic advantage to Ukraine for the United States, given their position with Russia. But the problem that I have at this point is we have a lot of stuff. Our house is very dirty here in the United States. We have a lot of stuff that we really need to be taken care of here. I am much less concerned about Ukraine and what's going on there.
Well, I'll just close it out on this. I respect your opinion. I've got to disagree with it. That's why I love having you on the show, because, hey, folks, we bring different opinions on the show, and I respect it. And Heather, you're not alone. There's a segment of the voters that, are concerned that we're going to continuing disarmament. My belief is we have to do whatever we have to do to help the Ukrainians defeat the Russians. I know the European Union and NATO seem to have stepped up. You can't just say, well, it's all the US now. It's not. NATO has stepped up. And this
Mark, who funds NATO?
Well, we're a big funder of, but the European governments have stepped up. Donald Trump called for them to spend 2% of their budget on defense, and most of them are doing it now. So, I'm going to give Trump a lot of credit for that. Of course, the mainstream media will never give him credit for anything, but he did. And Trump called it a couple of years ago and he said, hey, Germany, you better be careful. You're relying on Russia for your gas. Trump was prophetic. But anyhow, Heather, we're out of time. Listen, it's great having you on the show today. I mean, my pleasure. And folks, you can follow Heather at Shouse on the House. Shouse in the House, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
That's the blog.
And Mark, you'll be on with me next week, so we'll get to talk about some of this stuff a little bit more in depth, for sure.
Yes, we will get into it, and thank you for the invite. All right, folks, that's it for today. We've got Drew tomorrow. Happy to have you with us. Stay safe. We'll cut through the propaganda. See you on Wednesday. Have a good evening.